will be available on our webpage. If you don't want you know, a tile coming up with your name or something like that on the webpage, we'd suggest that you drop out of the chat now. And just for any staff or colleagues of yours that are trying to get in and they're having issues, the application really only works in Google Chrome. So if they're using Microsoft Edge or Internet Explorer, they'll need to open it in Chrome. So with all of that covered, Steve, I hope you can hear me and I hope that you're there. Before we get sort of started on the presentation topic, it'd be great if you could unmute yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself, your career so far, and then we can move into the topic. Thanks, Steve.
Hello, hopefully everyone can hear us. Thanks, RJ, for the opportunity to be part of today. And as RJ said, I'm here with Ben Richardson. We're in our lovely office in Derrimut. We are lucky enough to be able to be still operating, still working, and still operating relatively unchanged, which is a real privilege for us in our business. Obviously, very trying times and something that we've never experienced before. And just even sitting here now talking to a TV and there's 90 or 100 people listening in, it's a bit strange. So obviously, this is something that we never expected to have, but we're all in this together, and hence why, as a business, we've tried to put together a bit of an information package that we can share with the industry. A bit about myself and Ben. So my career started in the aquatic industry a very long time ago as a pool lifeguard, probably similar to most of the people on this session at the moment. I went to university and studied sports science and sports management. Somehow fell into a bit of a project management and construction type role with the YMCA, and then crossed paths with Commercial Aquatics Australia on a large project in South Australia. Joined the business here about 9 years ago. Currently now as a construction manager, looking after all the new builds, whether it be obviously the pool structures, finishes, and the filtration is our specialty. And Ben joined our business 5 years ago. Ben's got a whole career background in pools, very similar to me, but more always in the maintenance side. So he's been in pool servicing and maintenance for his whole career. And Ben looks after the service side of the company. So I think, 40 odd sites around Victoria we look after. And yeah, so obviously the two of us, we've got a lot of different experience. And today the idea is we wanted to share with you the document which we've created as a business based on a lot of the feedback we've received and a lot of the calls we've had over the last few weeks. And yeah, definitely open for any questions. I have to put my glasses on to be able to read those questions. So obviously any questions we've got, we may not be able to answer some of the questions, but look, we would like to try and help where we can. And if there's any information we can get externally from this meeting, we'd love to do that and get back to you as soon as we can. So what I'll do, I'll try and share our screen. So excuse me if this doesn't work. Hopefully this works. So we've obviously now lost.
That's it, Steve. We can see your there.
Okay, beautiful. So obviously the reason why this document was put together, you know, like all of you, we were faced with some very difficult situations, and a lot of different questions came our way. So between the Victorian and our WA office, we came up with this document, and it really came about because a lot of calls we received really early on were clients saying, well, you know, if we're not going to be on site, we want to just turn the pool off, and obviously save cost and you know, limit any supervision. But obviously we wanted to explain to people that the implications of doing that actually could be quite severe and quite detrimental to the pool itself. So this document was really designed to help guide operators and facilities into what they should and shouldn't do in an extended period of shutdown. And obviously, yeah, the other part of it was that we wanted to make sure that these pools were ready to go and ready to operate as soon as government allowed us to do so. We hope that we are given a longer period of time to prepare again, because no matter what, in this extended period of shutdown, there will be a time needed to, you know, raise chemical levels, raise heating, microbiological testing, superchlorination, all of these types of things. So obviously we wanted to stop people from going into that full shutdown. So we put this document together to try and touch on those areas. So if you have a look, I'll scroll down. One of the main considerations is obviously cost. So we understand that if you're not going to be at your facility, I'm not sure what that document's doing. Hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, so yeah, so to try and understand where we can save cost, we want to help where we can. So some of the issues that can arise if we do shut a pool down that's full of water, this is the main reason why we wanted to put this document together. So stagnant water can obviously then create subsequent microbiological growth in the pool system, which can be really difficult to get back out. If it's allowed to grow and bacteria starts to grow inside the system, even superchlorination may not fully remove that from the system. So by keeping the system running, albeit at a lower chemical level, we'd like to hope that that will stop the microbiological growth occurring. The risk of infection as a result of that biofilm with the pool can form within the pool and in the system and the pipework. So it's similar to that first point, that once that starts, it's very, very, very difficult to remove. And it also can be a risk for the pool itself. If there are people and staff moving around inside the building, having that growth in that water can be quite a health hazard also. This one is something that we feel that people may not consider at times. So it's more about the warranty. So for those of you who have got a relatively new facility, there is a risk that if you were to close and turn off a system, that actually can impact your warranty. So if you turn a system off and a pump is sitting there stagnant for 2 to 3 to 4 weeks, even longer, it's a very good chance that corrosion will start to occur inside the volute of the pump. Same with chem controllers. If you were to turn probes off and not decommission them correctly, you can then cause issues with caps. Once again, that can void warranty. So we wanted to make sure that if everyone keeping their systems running, they're not impacting their equipment as much. Pumps and heaters, obviously other equipment, so like I mentioned, but pumps before, but heaters are another big one. A lot of direct fire pool heaters. So if you've got the old Raypack style heaters, if the water's sitting stagnant inside those, that corrosion can occur quite quickly and can really degrade the life of the actual heat exchange inside that heater. So seizing and blocking, I'm sure a lot of you have seen it on a lot of outdoor pools. Ben, I know you have. Yep. When you restart an outdoor pool that's been decommissioned for 4 to 5 to 6 months, the corrosion growth can occur and it can actually cause motors to seize. So one of those things is to try and so that when we do get the green light, we don't have that sort of very long-term major maintenance to undertake. So the increased risk of operators during the system restart due to requirements of handling algae-filled water. I used to work as a lifeguard. I've done my fair share of cleaning outdoor pools. It's a really dangerous and health hazardous task. You've got very high levels of chlorine, you've got a lot of algae. So trying to keep them running will eliminate that risk. Increased water consumption through a requirement of dumping the water. So let's say you do have an algae buildup. Some pools may have to actually dump that water out. We're still in a water conscious time. So keeping it running will resist that issue and that cost. And obviously the re-cleaning. It's a significant amount of cost involved in cleaning any pool that's gone green. I know in my experience, it's a 2-week process and a considerable amount of chlorine, which will obviously offset any cost if you do run the system at a lower level. Some pools may not have that ability to do that. However, we believe that most pools can run, even if it's a day on, day off type situation as well. That might be another way if you haven't got the VSDs and all the technological systems to allow you to do it automatically. I'll keep going down the next page. Okay, so structural integrity. So this is a really interesting one. In Victoria, we have highly reactive soil. So for those of you who don't know what that means, we have a lot of clay in the ground here in Victoria, especially around Melbourne. And clay can be exceptionally reactive. So it can heave, it can expand, and it can contract. So let's say, for example, you were to empty a pool for whatever reason, and the ground surrounding your pool is not adequately drained, or it's got this reactive clay. If the ground is wet or it's moist, or there's a pool leak and the ground is like that, it actually can swell and it can lift a pool out of the ground. And there's been numerous examples of that around Victoria over the last 50 years. We're a lot more conscious of it nowadays, so a lot more pools you'll see go in with what we call board piers to hold them down. So if you were to empty your pool, there's a very distinct chance that you can actually damage the structure of the pool. So that's why, once again, we want everyone to keep their pools full, keep them operating, so that we don't have that risk. That's a significant cost, and it can actually damage a pool beyond repair if that was to occur. Similar to that, so tiles and render and plaster finishes can become drummy. So the term drummy is a bit of a simple, it's a hollow tap on the tile when you know that it's no longer structurally adhered to the pool itself. That can happen if you take that water out. So if you were to empty a pool and you were to do it in a very fast fashion, that change in pressure against the finish and or the structure can cause significant damage, long-term damage, where you can see literally 10, 20, 30, 50 square metres of tiles fall off a pool quite quickly. That also talks about temperature. For those of you that have been turning down your temperature in your pools, that's completely fine to do that. However, it needs to be done in a very slow, methodical manner. So we recommend 2 degrees every 24 hours, no more than 0.25 of a degree per hour. And then you get it down to ambient outside air temperature before you turn off any boilers. That's a really important one. We know that there's links between that and potential damage to pool finishes and structures. So really important that on the deheating and the reheating that you follow that same methodology. So yeah, the pools can subject to hydrostatic pressure and uplift. That's a bit similar to the one I mentioned earlier. If there is groundwater outside of the pool structure, so you may be in a low-lying area where you might be near creeks, etc. We've just had a lot of rain in the last week. If you were to empty your pool and there's water that's on the outside of it in the ground, it can literally bob up like a cork. Unfortunately, I have seen that happen on pools, and it's very painful to see. Hydrostatic valves in the bottom of pools that's the reason why they exist. However, you may not know if they're actually working correctly or not. They might be damaged, they might be broken. So once again,
not even have them.
They may not even have them, exactly. So keeping your pool full is the best insurance policy against that happening. Many apartment pools, which I'm not sure how many of you on this call are involved in that space, they're on vibration isolation, which is basically we've got some pools now that are on springs. So if you were to decrease the water volume out of that structure, it can change the weight load on the springs, which can cause basically unsettling movements in the structure. So once again, we want to keep those pools full. And then obviously the cost and time for that, if we were to have any of this sort of damage, some of that can be significant. We're talking months and months and tens of hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of damage. So warranties and things can be held if we keep them full and keep them operating. So
hey Steve, we've just had a question come from Aaron Moore out at Splash.
Yep.
Just if you have any thoughts about adjusting the air temperature if you are dropping the pool temperature. So you mentioned ambient air temperature. Just any thoughts on that?
Yeah, okay, so I should have explained that. So what we recommend is to do it concurrently. So if you're lowering the temperature of the pool water, we would ask that you lower the air temperature at the same time and the same rate. So we keep an equilibrium in the space. So if the pool air temperature and the pool temperature are dropping together, that way there's no differential between the two. Once you reach, so look, let's say at the moment, ambient air might be an average of 18, 19 degrees. Once you reach that temperature, you can then shut both the heating and the air down. It's really important that you keep them together though. So you don't want to drop one over the other.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks. That's a great answer. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go, hopefully everyone can still see that screen. RJ, can you see our document again?
Yep, we can see the document. Great, thank you.
Okay, so our advice during the period. So this is a bit of a list of things that we recommend to do. Every case is different. So we tried to cover as much as we could. However, as you can understand, there's a lot of different pools, a lot of different age, a lot of different levels of technology. So obviously try and use what you can here. And if you have any other specific questions, then we can obviously help you out. So first of all, contact your maintenance provider. Commercial Aquatics, I highly recommend. Not a bad outfit. Ben's available anytime. So, and they can take you through specific steps of your system. So, like us, we have pools that we maintain, so we know them very intimately. You may have a contract partner that you work with there for your maintenance. Speak to them, get their opinions, and make sure that you do it together. So chlorine levels, we've said lowering it to a minimum of 1 part per million. If you go much lower, the chances of algae growth obviously increase. pH 7.6 to 7.8. That is quite high on the pH. We had a bit of internal discussion about that. We would love the pH level to be kept lower, which will obviously help decrease the chance of algae. However, there's a cost issue. CO2, if some pools are on CO2, keeping them at a lower level pH might be more difficult. If you can, that would be great. We would obviously like to see it lower, but knowing that there's a cost implication there and maybe more increased supervision. So 7.6 to 7.8 is a great outcome there if we do that. So check your chemical concentrations and pH daily. So we understand that a lot of facilities, there are no longer staff on site, but we really need you to keep a close eye on it. So once a day, if you're lucky enough to have remote monitoring, that helps. You can check the levels. But if you can go in and have a general look at the plant room once a day to make sure there's no other safety issues and the plant's still operating. Part of that also is obviously checking your restocking for your chemicals. I'm not sure, obviously we're having some issues with chemical supply at the moment. We know dry chlorine's a bit of an issue, most of that's imported. So keeping an eye on your levels so that you can restock in a suitable time. Heating can be turned off, provided the water is cooled naturally to ambient temperature. Water should not be lower than more than 2 degrees per 24-hour period. And obviously we've said there, consult your pool maintenance provider regarding draining down or bypassing of the heating system if that's required. UV and ozone can be turned off. We understand that UV and ozone is expensive, especially in UV. Globe life is an important one. So if you can turn a UV off, your combined chlorine will be lower. Obviously, you're not having a lot of oxidization. So turning off UVs will be a good cost saving. Pool circulation. So this is a bit of an interesting one. So it's to continue to allow the movement of the water throughout the pool pipework, gutters and equipment and balance tanks. This can be reduced to no less than 50% of the design flow rate. Water flow may need to be adjusted to ensure movement throughout the full depth of water. So if you're lucky enough, like I mentioned earlier, to have an automated system that can move you can set on VSDs, that's great. What you may need to do is do an alternate day. So maybe run it for 2 or 3 days, turning off for 2 or 3 days. If you can, if this pool can obviously hold the water and no leaks. But we need to make sure the water's still circulating. So some pools that have limited flow, that might be too low. You might need to run a little bit higher to get the water to be flowing evenly around the system. Pool blankets can be used, but we recommend that you do remove them 1 day every 7 days to ensure that there's no chloramine buildup underneath those blankets. That's to make sure that obviously safety for everyone inside the building, and obviously any safety concerns underneath the blankets as well. Ensure you continue your regular pool maintenance service, so weekly, monthly, whatever it may be. We actually recommend that you do more maintenance now. This is a great opportunity. The silver lining is that you don't normally get to close. You don't normally have the opportunity to go and replace those wet deck tiles that are around the edge, lower the water level, replace pumps, replace bits and pieces. Obviously, we may have an impact on stock availability. At the moment, we're seeing fairly good availability of pumps and valves, etc. Hopefully, that if there's anything you do need, that we can, and other service providers can get that material for you and take the time to do the maintenance now. So superchlorination is a good one to do. As we don't know when this period will end, we would probably urge people to superchlorinate closer to the reopening phase, not necessarily now, as you may need to redo it again. But a superchlorination and a microbiological test prior to reopening would definitely be recommended, so that we can ensure that the water is as safe as it can be. There we go, thank you. And obviously the last one there is take the time to review any major works. You can audit plant rooms well at the moment. Divers can come in and obviously look through structures, finishes, caulking, to make sure that there isn't any other maintenance required. Whether it's done in this period or maybe later, it's a great opportunity to plan for that now. So you can get some quotations, do your capital maintenance budgets while you have got the time to do it. And once again, you may not have the opportunity to get in during business hours and do exploratory testing and pressure testing, all that sort of stuff, and dye testing in your structures. So great opportunity to do that. That's our document we've got there. RJ, I'm happy if anyone's got some questions and bits and pieces, we're happy to help out where we can.
Okay, thanks so much, Steve. That was really informative, and I learned a few things there that that I never knew before. So we have had a few questions come through from the chat. So if you don't mind, I might just sort of go through some of those, and if anyone has any other questions, feel free to drop those into the chat. We've got a good sort of 20 minutes left in the session, so there's plenty of opportunity to ask questions that you might have, and the only silly question is the one you don't ask. So don't be afraid to jump in there. So we had obviously Aaron's question. We had someone ask about, do you get that drum effect on a fiberglass pool?
Is it drummy finishes or the hydrostatic lift?
I think it's the hydrostatic lift, which I assume would occur.
Yeah, definitely. Actually more so in a fiberglass pool, because it doesn't have a lot of mass to it. So obviously fiberglass is, in relative terms to concrete, is quite thin. So if there's any water behind a fiberglass structure, it can crack and damage a lot easier than a concrete structure. They should still have a hydrostatic valve in the bottom of it. What we recommend, if you do have to empty your pool for whatever reason, is the first thing to do is to double check that the hydrostatic valves are operating as soon as the water's low enough.
Can you hear me okay, guys? Sorry, someone started sharing their screen there. So we had another question from Tyler asking whether we should be draining spas during this period.
Look, to be honest, the same rules apply. So whether it's a spa or a 50-metre pool, those factors as far as potential hydrostatic lift, tile drumminess, it can still occur. Yes, being a smaller volume, it's a lot easier to refill and recommission. As long as you've checked through those items that we've listed on there, and that you do adhere to lowering the temperature at the right speed, the same thing, so lowering the water, making sure you're doing it at a very slow rate, then it should be fine to empty the spa.
And we've also got potentially spas with balance tanks. If we're not emptying the water in the balance tank, we could have, a foot worth of water in the bottom of the pool that goes stagnant that we're potentially just going to put straight back in the spa when we turn it on.
So like we mentioned before, talk to your maintenance contractor. Hopefully that's us. So we can help you with the specifics of that. If a spa, it is the easier of the structures to do, but once again, as long as you tick through that list there, and like Ben's saying, check balance tanks and the like, then you should be fine to do it.
Thanks, Steve. So we had we've got another couple of questions here. So Adam Kavanagh asked if you were happy to circulate the document. So Adam, that document is available on Commercial Aquatics webpage, as well as the LSV webpage under our Health Alert tab. So there's a couple of resources there, and I'll drop a link into those resources into this chat as well, so you can download it straight from here. We had another question from Sarah Jane, which was, just what about running a plant during solar production hours and shutting down overnight, if there's any considerations there?
Yeah, look, that's fine also. The one thing to be careful of, so I'm sure a lot of you would have seen this, when you shut a pool down, there's a lot of places where the volume of the water in the body of the pool can escape. So as an example, an older pool, whether it's a wet deck pool, the joints in the tiling on the wet deck may not be watertight anymore, so the water can escape down into the wet deck. So you might find that the next morning your water level has dropped significantly in the pool. That water ends up in the balance tank, can go down and overflow, which means you're constantly trying to chase top up, re-top up each day. If you're going to go to that method, check those things. If the pool is in good condition and it's holding its water well, then that's a fine method to go with. But run through that first and make sure that you're not just going to be wasting significant amounts of water.
Okay, thank you. So we had Joe ask if there was any regulations around long closures of aquatic centres. I think from our end, there's nothing that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if you're aware of anything in that space either, Steve.
Look, not that we're aware of. Obviously, this is an unheard of situation. Like in my whole career, I've never seen a pool close for more than 24 hours. So, from as far as I'm concerned, I'm not aware of it. No.
Okay, and then we had Andy ask, what are the top 3 mistakes to avoid?
Wow. Look, deheating is a big one. So we're all aware of it as an industry. We've had some issues with tiling in pools of late. And there's a whole range of issues that cause that potentially. Like there's probably 50 things I could tell you that would cause tiles to fall off a pool. However, one of the big ones is definitely the application of heat and the deheating of a pool. So that's definitely the first one. So making sure that you do deheat the pool at the right rate. So like we mentioned earlier, no more than 2 degrees every 24 hours. Really 0.25 degree an hour is the most, up or down. And then making sure that the air is being done at the same speed. That's probably the first one. Second one.
A lot of this, people got to remember, a lot of this, and yes, it does come down to cost, but a lot of this equipment is engineered and designed to consistently run. So before turning equipment off, once again, you really should speak to your service provider. That's probably another big thing to avoid, just simply turning things off.
And we see that, unfortunately, in most seasons on outdoor pools. Some pools are decommissioned exceptionally well, and they've got really clear procedures on that. And some people just literally turn the key and walk out the door. So yeah, that's definitely one of them. The last one I probably would have is emptying pools. It's a really big risk. And as I said, in Victoria, we're a little bit unlucky here. Our ground conditions are not fantastic with reactive clay. So one of our, our manager in Perth, Ryan, has joined us on this call. So he is lucky enough, he's in sand. So they can empty pools and do whatever they like because they've got this beautiful free draining material. We don't have that here. So please don't drain pools without taking the necessary steps to ensure that the pool is safe without water inside it.
Okay, brilliant. We had another question about any issues with expansion joints with the drop in temperature.
So same thing, they can be really susceptible to that change. Unfortunately, you will more than likely see, if you were to deheat a pool and drain a pool, you would more than likely see failures in your corking. That's why we recommend don't empty the pool if you don't have to. If you just deheat it, the corking, if it's in good condition, it should be fine. If it's towards the end of life, let's say it's 5 years old, maybe longer, you might find that it may contract slightly, but you can keep an eye on that visually from the surface. You may have to jump in and have a bit of a swim to make sure it's okay, but keeping the water in it should hopefully keep it in a good enough condition.
Okay, and we have a question from Aaron Moore out at Splash again, and he was talking about hyperchlorination and contact time. He said would just maintaining the health department parameters equate to a hyperchlorination over time, or is a classic hyperchlorination over a day or two prior to opening probably a good idea anyways? And I think probably part of the response is the hyperchlorination has to be higher than the regular concentration. But Steve, if you've got any thoughts on that.
From a pure mathematical perspective, Aaron's right. If you were to hold, let's say, 3 parts per million for this entire duration and it would never dip, that would work. But you can't guarantee that, and there's no way that we could comfortably say that you've had it consistently for that whole period of time. So unfortunately, we would say you should do a hyperchlorination, a more traditional style, towards the end of this before we reopen. Just to be sure, just in case there might be a period of time where the chlorine ran out or whatever it may be, and you've lost that contact time.
Perfect. Thanks, Steve. Just to let everyone know, I'm just sort of scrolling through the chat. Adrian has dropped the link to Steve's fact sheet. So if you go into the conversation window and scroll through, you can find Adrian's comment there with a link directly to the Commercial Aquatics webpage and that fact sheet. Got a question from Rachel. How does algae growth affect the staff if the pool is not in use? Is it airborne?
No, more just around the fact that you're going to have it coming over the wet deck. So, if you've got staff cleaning or doing maintenance, for example, replacing wet deck or any tiling, wherever it may be, if they're making contact with the water, I'm not a scientist as such, but I can't comment about it being airborne. But I know obviously if you are going to be doing works around the pool, you may come into contact with the water.
Okay, thanks, Steve. We've got TSC group asking about alkalinity and calcium hardness needing to be checked on a daily basis. So there is the if the pools are operating, they're open. There's the health department requirements, the regulations. But what's the recommendation when the pools are closed? Steve, do you have any thoughts on that?
Look, that would definitely be okay to be done weekly.
Yeah.
Once again, we still do need to be mindful with warranty periods. If you start to come outside of this range, you may void any warranties that it may hold.
Okay, thanks, Ben. And then we had a question which I might sort of expand on a little bit more. So someone asked, Stephanie asked, how long do you think it'll take to reheat the pool when we reopen? And I guess just to expand on that is when we're talking about cooling down the pool at no more than 2 degrees every 24 hours. Is that the same when we reheat the pool?
Yep, exactly the same.
So in theory, then operators should be planning for, let's say they've got the Rolls Royce of condensing boilers, and they can heat their pool very quickly. They should still aim to heat it by no more than 2 degrees every 24 hours, regardless of their capacity. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. So look, unfortunately, we don't know how much of a warning we're going to get as an industry when we can reopen. So that's probably the biggest concern we've got is if the government says, okay, you can reopen in 2 days' time. Unfortunately, a lot of you may not be able to do that. If you've got a 50-metre pool and you run it at 29, 30 degrees, it's going to take over a week to get it there. So you may need to be aware of that and manage expectations of your clients and obviously your patrons that if the government doesn't give adequate warning, and maybe that's something that LSV should be advocating for the industry, is to give the warning as long as they can so that the facilities can get their pools back up and ready in the right time, doing it the right methodology.
Yeah, that's really good information, Steve, and something that everyone listening here, I'm sure there's a lot of operations coordinators and managers. Make sure that you pass that information up to your managers and that they pass that on to their contract partners as applicable, or their branch managers at council. There's definitely going to be political expectations that the pools are open as quickly as possible to help people get back to exercise, and there'll be all sorts of commercial pressures as well. But that's a really good point that you don't want to permanently damage, a $60 million community asset in the process. So thanks, Steve, for that recommendation. We've got Pat Otten down from Cardinia there with a question around backwashing. How often should we be backwashing over this period?
So with backwashing, you can lower the frequency of your backwashing. It would be very dependent on differential pressure throughout your filter, and still water quality, which with no bather load should be lasting you much longer. So yes, you can reduce the amount you backwash.
Thanks, Ben. That's a great response there. So I've got Nicholas Hoynes as well. Has just asked, what impacts does routine superchlorination have on pool plant equipment finishes?
I'll give you my honest answer. It's the worst thing in our industry. It's going to literally ruin plant equipment, tiles, caulking, everything. We understand why we have to do it. We obviously support that the health department requires it. We don't recommend that people superchlorinate as a routine if they've got all the right things in place. So let's say, for example, you've got UV, you've got a great cleaning regime, you've got good breakpoint chlorination happening all the time, you've got really good balance. Then superchlorination, does it need to be done? That's probably the real question. We have seen a lot of facilities where I've had significant amounts of superchlorination. We have seen degradation in pump volutes, so the wet ends. We've seen filter linings damaged. We've seen probes fail. butterfly valve. So, you know, we use a PVC butterfly valve with an EPDM valve system. We've seen some of those fail. That some of them are sitting in pure chlorine plants and don't fail. So it is going to increase the cost of the maintenance of these pools. So we understand, yes, there's a balance, but if you maintain good maintenance, good operational cleanliness, good chemical balance, and you've got things such as UV or ozone, then doing it as a routine only may not be required.
Okay, thanks, Steve. That's a really good considerations for everyone to weigh up. So I guess maybe to expand on that a little bit, if we've also, Andy's just pointed out that we've actually got DHHS on this stream next week. We've got Rachel Poon and I'm pulling a blank here. Michelle O'Donnell, I think, which is one of the water unit officers and specialists in that area. So we've got them next week, who'll be able to speak to some of this a little bit more. But just on that question about superchlorination, with the contact time, and there's probably a little bit of a push from a business perspective to try and increase the chlorine concentration as much as you can, get it as high as you can to reduce that closure window as short as possible. Does that have a more detrimental effect on pool plant?
Yeah, definitely. We obviously won't go into specifics, but we've seen some sites where they've done that. They've increased the concentration level, and it can actually instantly damage equipment. So a lot of you may not see, but inside, let's say, a balance tank, there's a lot of, sometimes there's pipe work running through that. So that has to be supported with clipping and strutting. So that's normally in 316 stainless steel. We've seen 316 stainless steel completely corroded and eroded to nothing, and it actually can collapse. So running your chlorine at exceptionally high levels to try and speed the process is exceptionally detrimental. So we don't recommend it. And I understand there's a balance there between operational requirements and obviously having to meet the Department of Health requirement. But please keep in mind that you may not see the damage that's caused, but it's definitely happening. So keeping it at that 20 parts is really the most we recommend people going to. We are now getting warranties extended from a lot of our suppliers to warrant it up to the 20 parts per million, but not any higher than that.
Thanks, Steve. That's a really good bit of information that most people probably wouldn't know. So thanks for sharing that. We've got another question here from Stephanie. She's just asking, how often would you guys recommend that we have an operator at the site? Does someone need to be there weekly, daily, a few hours a day? What kind of daily checks and balances should operators be doing over this closure period?
Look, we'd still like to see daily checks on the plant room with all the equipment. You know, there is potential for equipment to fail, where you might get leaks, and if you're not doing your daily walkthrough of the plant room, there's potential it could cause a lot of damage.
Okay, thanks, Ben. And then I've got Nicholas here is just asking thoughts on alternative shock treatments, chlorine dioxide, potassium monopersulfate, possible impacts. I think just to sort of also, Nick, just to sort of jump in there a little bit, it's probably a question for DHHS next week. We're aware that industry have asked this question on a number of occasions, and that it was considered through the guideline updates. But currently, chlorine dioxide is not approved for use in Victoria, is my understanding. But it's probably a question for next week. I don't know if Steve's got any further thoughts, but that's probably one to ask the DHHS guys.
So from our point of view, chlorine dioxide. Once again, I'm not a chemist, so my understanding of it is limited. I believe that there are a couple of suppliers who are now saying that it is acceptable to use. I'm not personally that experienced, Ben. I don't think you're so much across it either. The one thing I do know about it is when you add it to pool water, and if the pH is low enough, the chemical reaction that takes place can create chlorine gas. So The risk there is, one, is obviously if you're in a pool hall that's got limited mechanical, if you're creating that off gas of chlorine gas, it's exceptionally dangerous. Also, once again, like the balance tank example I gave earlier, if that chemical reaction, let's say you're adding the chlorine dioxide tablets to a wet deck or into a balance tank, and the pH is low enough and you create that chlorine gas, that will erode and corrode clipping and strutting almost instantly. And we've seen that on a few sites. So please be very careful with that equipment and using chlorine dioxide and the way you add it and the way you use it and the way you keep your pH levels. Yeah, obviously consult the supplier and really carefully follow any instructions of how to add it to the system.
Especially at the moment with all the mechanical services in pool halls potentially turned off.
Yep.
Okay, all right. So we've got probably one last question before we wrap up here, and it's just from Adrian Pano, who is one of our staff here, and Adrian's just asking about online monitoring. What kind of technology could assist aquatic facilities over this period? I know you guys deal with sort of live monitoring that can be cast to phones and iPads and things like that. Can you maybe just talk people through the type of how technology can assist through this period?
So yeah, online monitoring at the moment would be fantastic. It does not remove the fact daily checks on plant room just to a check on equipment. However, having remote control or remote access of the plant room to decrease temperature and all those factors is to have the ability to do that is fantastic.
So Ben, just to, if you're running a typical PLC or a MECMate system or something like that, is there the ability for facilities to retrofit that type of technology? Can they put a SIM card and a chip in there and then all of a sudden control their plant remotely, or is it sort of a wider upgrade?
No, it can be done to any system. I don't believe it would be just as simple as putting in a modem and a SIM card, but potentially, yeah, the upgrade can be done quite easily to most system with a HMI screen.
Okay, thanks so much. Thank you very much, gents, for your time. I'm sure this has been really helpful, really informative for everyone listening in. I know I've learned a lot over the last sort of 45 minutes here, and just want to thank you very much both for your time and contributions. And just to fill everyone in, so this week we've got swimming and water safety education. We've got some online resources that you can share with your swim school participants. On Thursday, we've got our CEO, Dr. Nigel Taylor, and Shane Dunn, the CEO of Align Leisure, talking about responding to emergencies. And we've got a bit of an interview talking to them about how do you lead organizations through significant upheaval and crisis, just like what we're going through at the moment. So that'll be a really interesting one. Next week, as mentioned in this stream, we have the DHHS professionals online. So we'll have Rachel Poon and Michelle O'Donnell talking about the water quality and regulation updates. We have keeping swim school families engaged on the Wednesday. And then on the Thursday, we've got another CEO panel. So we've got Nick Cox, CEO of Belgravia Leisure, and Caroline Moore, CEO of YMCA Victoria. And they're going to talk about planning for after the crisis ends and what kind of recovery efforts they're putting their organizations are starting to prepare for now. And then on Friday, obviously this Friday is Good Friday, there's no session, but the following Friday we have Chantal Broderick, who's one of the board members of Fitness Australia. She's got quite a large online following, and she'll be talking about how to start your own fitness podcast for anyone interested in fitness. So once again, thanks so much, Ben and Steve. It's been great having you guys on. We're really privileged to partner with you guys and have great working relationships with you guys and the industry. And thank you everyone for listening. Join us again tomorrow and or next week if you are an operator. Thanks again.